The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And we're here again. Fuzzy as we are, but I'm Chip.
Hey, I got some interesting information which came out, and I only recently got the report about 3 minutes ago, which I think people want to hear. The state has issued guidelines on who to save during the coronavirus surge. State officials have released guidelines for a potential triage of COVID-19 patients in the case where demand overwhelms hospitals amid a shortage of critical resources. The Mass Department of Public Health issued on Tuesday the Crisis Standards of Care, which recommend how hospitals should prioritize treatment if the coronavirus pandemic causes difficult choices for healthcare personnel. The purpose of this document, which is 24 pages long, by the way, is to provide guidance for the triage of critically ill patients in the event that the public health emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic creates demand for critical care resources that outstrips the supply. The overarching principle that will guide the decision-making regarding use of critical care resources in this or any public health emergency is maximizing overall benefit to populations while handling individual cases fairly. The guidelines, which are not mandatory but are highly recommended for hospitals to prioritize saving the most years of life. If a patient has a very high risk of an imminent death, the hospital is advised to treat only the symptoms. Other patients would be assigned a score from 1 to 8 based on their odds of survival. Medical workers whose own health is critical to saving others are prioritized, as are pregnant women at or beyond the usual standards for fetal viability. When scores are tied between two patients, younger patients would be given priority. The guidelines are a number of factors and should be considered, including that should not be considered, include race, immigration status, sexual orientation, economic status, and more. The team assigning scores at the hospital should not include the doctors or nurses treating the patients. It goes on, but I'll tell you now, it seems that the death boards are starting to be formed.
Well, it seems that the government, again, in its infinite wisdom, has chosen to discriminate against old people because you can't discriminate based on their immigration status, color, race, creed. But if you're old, you get to die. You're first in line to die. So even if you're a healthy older person, you get to die over a younger person. So this is BS again, and the government is going to triage. Well, you've done enough triage, CJ. If you get somebody who's dying and they're 25 and you know your chances of saving them are about 2%, and you got an older person and you got a 50-50 shot, they should be higher on a triage list.
And they, under these rules, they would be higher on the triage list. If you're looking at imminent death, it's palliative care only. You only treat the symptoms. So if somebody comes in who's 25 and somebody comes in who's 65, and the person who's 25 looks like they're going to die almost immediately, and the person who's almost 65 just needs some, either oxygen or just some palliative, some regular care, that will go that way. So when it's that far out, the choice of life years is going to make it. But when it comes down to choosing equipment, when you're down to somebody who's like 65 and 25 and they've got one ventilator, the 25-year-old's getting the ventilator.
Yeah, well, which is discrimination because will they have a complete medical history of that guy? There are 65-year-olds that have better immune systems than some of the 25-year-olds.
Exactly. I mean,
that's bullshit of the highest order because you know something? Once you get to be a certain age, you're disposable as far as the government is concerned.
You're a liability.
And as far as the medical community is, because I've heard doctors say to people who say they they basically say, well, once you get to a certain age, they go, well, what do you want? You're already 75 or something, or you're 70, or you're some. So, you've already lived a pretty decent life. So they don't give a damn. So it's like, so we'll spend $1 million on some junkie, but we're gonna let you die because you've already lived 70 years, so screw it. We'll spend $10 million saving some junkie, and I'll tell you, that's bullshit. I'm sorry, it is bullshit. And I understand there is a necessity for triage, just like there is on a battlefield, just like there is in emergency situations and fires.
And we've both been in that situation. That's right.
But I mean, the fact that a country with the resources that the United States has, it can put that guideline in writing and basically say, well, you can't discriminate against anybody but old people, pisses me off. I'm sorry.
No, I can understand that. I really can. And again, in a mass casualty situation, you understand we have what we call triage tags: red, yellow, green, and black. And obviously, black means you're dead. Red means you're
black tag, yeah.
Black means you're dead. Red tags are you're probably not going to make it. You're highly critical. Yellow, you don't need a lot of care. You need some care, but you're not going to be critical. And green means you can get by and wait. You're not top of the list. But it makes it very difficult when you're looking at this, and they've taken the doctors. You'll notice the doctors and the nurses treating the patients out of the loop. They're not in the equation. The equation is going to be handled by bureaucrats most likely, and that's going to make it easier for them to say, well, Johnny Jones is a junkie. He's 25 and he needs a ventilator. But Mary Smith is 75. She's not doing very well. She needs a ventilator. But even though Johnny Jones is a junkie, we're going to give him the ventilator because we can't use that to discriminate against him. We can use his age, though. So, I mean, I think you need to look at the entire picture. For instance, someone like you who would come in, me knowing your history, I would give you the preference because you're in good shape. You exercise regularly. You take good care of yourself. You have very few health issues. But maybe because of your age, they're going to say, screw him. But they don't know your background. And I think that needs to be taken into consideration as well in this situation.
Well, you're right. And, battlefiels and emergency situations and granted, this is a per se emergency situation, but I look at this kind of stuff and it disturbs me because it's almost a systemic issue. Not only for this, life and death obviously is the ultimate choice here, and it disturbs me. But when I look at the discrimination, because you're not going to tell me, CJ, and I know if you disagree, please, you're not going to tell me that if somebody who's making this decision, some bureaucrat, as you said, if their 75-year-old mother needs a ventilator, they get the ventilator. If you're a rich movie star and your kid can't spell, can't add, subtract, multiply, or divide, she gets into a college because you pay somebody to say that she can row, even though she's never been in a boat in her life. She gets admitted because she's a quote unquote athlete, even though she isn't. We've seen this on television time and time again. There is a double standard in this society.
Of course.
The thing that disturbs me is I go back to one of the greatest human beings for empathy and for courage that in our recorded history, Mahatma Gandhi, when he said a society can be judged by the way it treats its elderly and its animals. And this society shits all over its elderly. That's the reality.
Right. This
is only stop there for life and death. It's everything. The rich have a different set of rules than we do.
The elected have a set of rules.
Yeah. in a court of law, they can hire some fancy lawyer and get off like Colsman Bulow did, and on a technicality, and they can get their kids into college even though they're dimwits and they don't deserve an education because they don't want it. They admitted it. Those kids said, I don't really want to go to college. I just want to go party.
Exactly.
Experience. So, stuff like this aggravates me. These people work hard their whole lives, and then at the end, when we have a pandemic like this, they're the first ones used as wheel shocks.
Yeah, and again, this is going to have a lot of effect on people as it gets out there for people to read. Of which I just sent you a copy of the guidelines. It's 24 pages long. It should make for interesting reading. I also sent it to Mr. Higgins. Hey, Patrick, you're going to get a copy of those too shortly. And if anyone else wants them, they can, shoot me a message on Facebook or over here at our show, and I'll be more than happy to share those guidelines with you. Do I think the guidelines are necessary? Yes. Do I think the way they're doing them, I think they're trying to do them as set aside as independent of any care being given. I think they're going to do it just like what we referenced to when Obamacare was coming out. They were talking about death panels. I think that's what this is actually going to become. You're going to have a group of doctors and nurses who are not treating the patient, and a couple of bureaucrats, high, board of directors members or something, who are going to sit down and go A, B, C, D. Mary gets it. A, B, C, D. Jenny gets it. A, B, C, D. Bobby gets it. And Joan, Oscar, and Philip all die. And that's kind of tough when you're on that board to be making that life or death decision for other people. But when you only have X number of
circumstance in many cases, because we've had reports of a 90-year-old that actually got the coronavirus and survived, and another 80 in a high 80s. So there are people who survive. As you said, they're different. And look, if you get a battlefield casualty or you get somebody coming into the emergency room, you got a bus accident, you got a whole bunch of people to triage. You don't know their medical histories, and obviously you got to go on what you can evaluate, which is limited. But this whole thing is BS, because when you go to your own hometown and your own hometown hospital, they have your medical records available. As you said, there are people in better shape at 50 and 60 and 70 than some of these millennials are that abuse themselves. And the thing is that when you're making a decision like this, a life or death, it's not only about who gets the ventilator. It's like that if you give the person a ventilator, will that help them survive the disease? And there are people that is not necessarily age determined. Granted, in many cases it is, but not in all cases. So if they want to kill somebody in my family because of their age, they're gonna as far as I'm concerned, that's murder. That is a death panel.
Yeah, and again, a lot of people are going to reviewing it that way, especially when they start reading the guidelines, which are very plain, very blasé. They don't take into consideration anything but what's in front of them. They're very objective, and that objective position may be good for some people, but for the person that they're making the decision about, it's not a good thing. Because I know if I'm there and I need a respirator, and Joe Blow from Idaho comes in and he's 26, and they say, well, sorry, CJ, you can't go. I'm going to pull out the card that I'm a healthcare professional. Hey, I'm a healthcare professional. I get priority. Just like the pregnant woman can pull out the pregnancy card. She gets priority. So, and by the way, Chip, you'd probably be able to pull out the public service card, the public safety card. Hey, I'm a public safety person, and you'll get priority. And, so again, you're picking and choosing who in our society is more important. Do I think nurses and doctors are important during a pandemic? Definitely. Do I think police, fire, EMS? Definitely. Do I think John Smith, who's 25 and, a senior in college, important? Yes, he is. Do I think that grandma is important? Yes, she is. But when we don't have the equipment, what are we supposed to do? We got 100 new ventilators in recently from the federal stockpile, but we still don't have enough. Plus, we need 10 times more ICU beds right now than we have. And where are those going to come from? So you've got the convention center in Boston being converted into a field hospital. You've got one in Worcester being converted into a field hospital. You have more in Taunton being converted into a COVID coronavirus hospital, and that's all they're treating there. If you come into the ER there with anything else, they're shipping you out to Brockton. So these are situations where we're prioritizing care where it needs to be prioritized on who's going to get what, and it's going to cause a lot of rub with people, and some people are going to be upset about it. I know that Senator Mark Pacheco is very upset that they reopened Taunton Hospital, Morton Hospital, and they're only making it for coronavirus. He thinks that's wrong. That emergency room should be open for everybody, but it's not. It's open for coronavirus patients, and if you come in with something else, you're getting shipped to Brockton.
Yeah, you're right, CJ. And the thing is that, look, the worst decision people can make is a life or death decision. And sometimes some people are in a position where you have to make life or death decisions. I've been in that position, you know, in emergency situations where you have to choose to make a rescue or who to rescue, and it's difficult. But you can only deal with the information you have. But see, the problem I have with this is, as you said, we're bringing in government and government bureaucracy into this decision-making process. And that disturbs me because nobody, if Charlie Baker came down and wanted to sit here alongside of me, he's not going to convince me that these bureaucrats aren't going to have bendable rules for the people they know. You're not going to tell me that somebody that's politically connected or related to somebody who's making that decision, that those guidelines are going to go out the window. We've already had rich people trying to buy that malaria drug that got caught already trying to stockpile a malaria drug for themselves and their friends and family. So, you know, this is the problem in the United States. We have the greatest military on the planet Earth. You're not going to tell me that we have mobilized enough on this, okay? We may not have enough ventilators, and the question is, why not? Why isn't, when we entered World War II, do you realize that there was not a car made, a refrigerator made, a consumer good made during the entire war? This nation switched over to a war economy, and every single business in the world became a war business. They made tanks, they made planes, they made bullets, they made guns. That's all they did. You couldn't buy a 1943 car. There's no such thing. You can't buy a 1943 refrigerator. You can't buy a 1943 anything. We did it once. Why can't we do it now? We're richer. We have more technology, and you're not going to tell me, I don't give a damn how many press conferences they have, because that's all for show. You're not going to convince me that they're doing everything they can, because if they did everything they could, rather than ordering everybody to stay home and put lines on the floor, they would be doing what we did in World War II. That's mobilizing everybody, not asking them, ordering. The reason that we beat Nazi Germany was because of our ability to produce goods. The reality is that the Germans made better tanks than we did. They made better airplanes than we did. They made better everything, just like they make better cars today. They're engineering geniuses. But the difference was when you knocked out a Tiger tank in World War II, it took them 6 months to produce another one. If you knocked out an American tank, there were 15 to replace it the next day because we were mass producing them. They weren't quite as good, but we got tons of them. So why haven't we mobilized everybody? The National Guard. People aren't working. Well, mobilize the Guard. Mobilize everything. Turn every armory into it. Stuff. Turn everything into making goods. You're not gonna. You know, this is. It's difficult, yeah. But I'll tell you what, you're not going to tell me it can't be done. You're not going to tell me I'm dealing in pie in the sky, rhetoric. We did it. We did to get to Europe than it is today. We have to get to England first. But we shut down the United States of America and turned it into a war machine.
And that's what the president's saying. The president's saying we're at war, and he hasn't really utilized totally the presidential the Wartime Act for provision of equipment. He's used it against GM so far, and that's it, to make ventilators. But even GM says even with that order, they're probably not going to be able to get those ventilators out for 6 or 7 months. So why wasn't that enacted before, when this first started? If they knew they didn't have the ventilators, which they did know. I mean, every politician, I'm sorry, it seems to be blanket, but every politician, in my opinion, from president down to mayor, has failed this system in one way or the other. And it's not necessarily deliberate. I think it's because a lot of them don't have the experience in dealing with this type of crisis. So again, you can't point a finger of blame like you did this, but at the same time, listen to what people are saying. There are people out there that know how to handle these pandemics, like Dr. Fauci, but nobody's listening to the man. And if they're not listening to him, why is he being put in all these press conferences? For FaceTime? I mean, the man has important points to make. He has said how many deaths we're going to be looking towards. He has said what we need to do. He's made it very clear. And his statements were kind of poo-pooed, like, well, maybe, I don't know. So you have to say what's going on. The people have to be important, not just what you want to do as a politician, because not everything is political. Sometimes you need to put yourself aside and say, hey, it's an election year, but I don't care. I'm going to do what I need to do.
Yeah, well, boy, I'll tell you, CJ, you're really asking for the world to get a politician to put politics aside. But see, the thing is that disturbs me is they have no knowledge of our own history. I know that Donald Trump is old enough to remember World War II. I know that he realizes that we rationed gasoline, we rationed sugar, we had no. See, they're so worried about our economy. We had no gross national product then. And as a matter of fact, it was the Second World War that ended the Depression. Because when everybody was working, they were either in the military or working in a shipyard or a tank factory or a bullet factory or a gun factory. But there were nothing to buy. You couldn't buy a new TV. You couldn't buy a new car. You couldn't buy a new anything. Everybody had a ton of money. And when the war ended, guess what? The economy took care of itself. It boomed. People had tons of money in a bank and nowhere to spend it. And they began to produce goods. And we basically cured the Depression because of that rationing. And ever since then, in every war we've ever had, we continued to produce goods. So it had the exact opposite effect. We had recessions because when they are limited goods and everybody's got money, the price goes up and you end up with a recession. But in Second World War, we didn't do that. But they don't learn. You're not going to tell me that they could have shut down the country. And as far as I'm concerned, that's exactly what they should have done. But as you said, it's an election year, and nobody wants to destroy the economy. But in reality, you could have actually helped the economy, because if you changed every factory into something to deal with the pandemic, you would have actually not made these people unemployed. You would have reemployed them.
I agree with that. And I think that, we're complaining so much about the economy failing because of this pandemic, and it really is. But nobody wants to take the bull by the horns and say, hey, we've already shut 99% of the businesses down. It's time to take that final leap and say, the only thing that we're going to really keep open is the companies making masks, the companies making, the sanitizers, the companies making ventilators, the companies making the equipment that we require, not we wish to have, but we require. And I think that's something we need to focus on again, and focus our country on, that it's not all about you. But when you look at the markets, when you look at the way people act, It's all about them. And that's the type of behavior that's got to stop. I'm tired of hearing excuses. I heard it yesterday from one of the markets I went to where they said, well, we have nothing because the people keep taking everything off the shelves and our supply chain has broken down. And after all of this is over, we're going to reevaluate our supply chain. You should have had your supply chain in place long before this. You're not going to tell me that XYZ company can do it, but you can't. And that's what really makes it, questionable. It scares me a little bit that this goes on. For those people who didn't know, while I'm talking about markets real quick, Amarillo's Market on Globe Street here in Fall River has closed their doors. There's no reason given. They just said, please keep an eye on us and we'll announce when we're reopening. This is, again, one of the effects of the pandemic, I'm sure. But this is what's happening. Businesses are closing. Will these businesses come back is another story. And we have to look at that. We have to prepare for that.
And you're right. But have we prepared? As I said, you can't learn from history. But sometimes they say, the old adage is if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. In this case, we should be repeating history. Just look at the toilet paper and the paper towels and stuff. In World War II, you didn't have that problem. You know why? You had to have a coupon to go buy gas and sugar. It was rations.
That's right.
So you think if they, you think they could learn from that? If everybody could only buy enough toilet paper to wipe their own rears, we wouldn't have the problem of watching people walk around. I was in Walmart last week. After I went to the dentist, I stopped at the Walmart in Dartmouth, and I walked in, and the first 3 carts I saw were full of toilet paper. These people were driving around with carts full of toilet paper. So I said, wow, they must have toilet paper. So I walked to the back with a toilet paper. There wasn't one roll of toilet paper left. They bought it all. The hell with the other people that needed toilet paper. So you know something? If the government rationed it, you would see. Well, guess what? People would get toilet paper. People would be able to get hand sanitizer. And as you said, why haven't we changed everything into these necessary? Because they keep saying we're in a war. Well, when we were in a war in World War II, we actually were in war mode. There was nothing in the United States that didn't have to do with World War II.
See, the problem that has happened is war today is not like war during World War II. War today has been sanitized, for the lack of a better expression. And that's why since World War II, we haven't had a shutdown of the country to fight the wars. We've been fighting Afghanistan for so long, nothing's happened. Nothing's happened to affect our country, and we need to have these quote unquote wars affect the way our country behaves and acts. And they keep saying, well, we can't have it interrupt our lifestyles here in America because we're at war. Even with the pandemic, we can't have it interrupt our lifestyle. What are you talking about? I'm stuck in my house 24 hours of the day. I can't go out. I can't go to a restaurant. I can't go to a movie. I can't go to the plays. I can't even go to my TV studio. I got to do this from home. So how is this not affecting my life? This is a war that's going to affect your life totally.
And the problem that we have is, as you said, we have a bunch of wimps. This is our society now. This is the wimp society, because the people who fought World War II and were subjected to rationing didn't have any problem with it. You know why? They were standing in bread lines anyway from the Great Depression. Those people were used to hardships. They refer to it as the greatest generation, and they were. Why? Because they were tempted by hardship. They knew what it was to have their electricity shut off. They didn't care if you froze to death. They didn't care if they shut off your gas, your electricity. They didn't care. They're standing in bread lines. People were out of work, and there was virtually no welfare. And those people, when they went to war, were prepared for hardship.
Yeah. Well,
that's one of the fundamental problems we have in our society. This society in the United States is hedonistic, and they're not prepared for anything except to have their lattes.
All right. Well, we're out of time, Chip. We never have enough time. Hey, everyone, thanks for watching. And remember, stay angry. If you need a copy of that triage report, let me know. I've got it for you.